How do I pronounce your name?
It's just Gaz.
Gaz. Wonderful. You're on with Austin and Seth. We would love to talk to you. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to have your opinion really on deathbed visions. Hours before people pass, they seem to get their clarity, like people with dementia, and they talk about seeing like they dead relatives that are in the room come to escort them. Even people, for example, if they not aware that have died, things like that.
Austin, did you want to talk to speak about the near-death or after-death experiences that people say is proof of an afterlife?
Sure. I talked about this with our last caller about the Homo sapien proclivity for storytelling and the effect that it's had on us psychologically and metaphysically, and just as a species in general, the way that it shaped our progression and our evolution, the stories that we tell about existence, the stories that we tell about the origin of our species, the stories that we tell about the origin of the universe, and indeed the stories that we tell about where we go after we die. And this kind of falls into that area. I worked as a hospice nurse when in my early 20s, and I watched a lot of people in the end of life situation that you're describing. And our brains and our bodies, it's really, really fascinating. You talk to anyone who works in healthcare, they'll tell you this. They know how to die. And especially when a person is dying slowly, when a person is in some kind of care facility and it's not something immediate, not some immediate kind of trauma like a gunshot wound or a car accident. When someone is dying slowly of a disease, the brain and body sort of have this process of shutting down. And there is this period that people will call, I think it's called like the lift. And it's like a few days before everything really starts shutting down, where there's this clarity, like you described with dementia patients and things like that. And all of a sudden there's this kind of euphoria that happens. And it's sort of a beautiful process that our bodies and brains sort of let us have while we're in this end phase. It doesn't happen for everybody. Not everybody is fortunate enough to get to experience something like this, whether they're experiencing it personally or watching a loved one go through it. But this human proclivity for storytelling, there's all kinds of different things that are going on during this death process. There's the leaking of the chemical DMT in the brain, this psychedelic chemical that goes into the brain during the actual process of death, where people have near-death experiences and they're revived and they go, "Oh, I saw this thing." You can see what a lot of people describe if you go and get DMT and smoke DMT. I'm not saying that there aren't universal, or not universal, but collectively reported experiences, kind of like people report with like sleep paralysis demons or things like that. I'm just saying that these things don't serve as substantive evidence of the existence of an afterlife. They could just as simply be a very rational, reasonable, plausible explanation for these things could be that human beings have a shared knowledge of stories about what happens after you die. And during this process, when the brain is shutting down, when the body's shutting down, as a means of comforting the person who is experiencing this sort of transitionary period, they kind of go into a psychedelic hallucination that involves a lot of elements of what they've been told about what happens after a person dies. And I think that that's just as reasonable, just as plausible, if not more so, of an explanation than that they are actually being visited by the passed on, forced ghosts or spirits of their family members that went before them, or being shown visions of the afterlife. That's sort of my explanation.
Yeah, but you got to think there's like people like say with dementia and say like their brother or sister died like a week before.
Gaz, do me a favor. Back your mouth off of the microphone or your cell phone or whatever you are using, because you are distorting to the point where we can't understand you. So if you can soften your voice and just draw back from that microphone just a little bit and start over again. What were your thoughts?
Is this any better?
Better.
That's a lot better.
What I think, a lot of atheists have deathbed visions as well, but ones I find more compelling is like people with dementia or serious illness who's had somebody pass on like a week or two before then, and they're not aware that that particular person have died, but that person then appears, say, with their mother or father who have already passed on as well. How can that be explained as like an hallucination or something?
Well, if I may, if the phenomenon of hypoxia, people whose brains are dying, they are oxygen deprived, and we see a surge of carbon dioxide, and there were other chemical factors there that are going on. The brain starts to fire in very wild directions. People have reported a white light. Memories are triggered, and so then if you have encountered people that you have loved, and whether it be a great grandmother or a child or something along those lines, those may image in your brain in moments right before death. So whether you have dementia or whatever your cognitive status is, I think we're still talking about a brain that is misfiring because it is oxygen deprived or it's chemically altered in some way. And even if there was not hypoxia or a chemical alteration of some kind, if somebody was near death or they were dead on the table for 90 seconds and came back, we're still in the arena of the anecdote. And anecdotes are nothing more, nothing less. And I like that sentence where, the plural of anecdote, the plural of anecdote is not evidence. So, I mean, these are interesting. We're fascinated by them, but they're certainly not really evidence of anything except we've got a misfiring mind.
No, I agree with what you're saying. They're not evidence, but they certainly are questionable.
I think they're interesting. We'd agree on that, wouldn't we, Guess?
Oh, they're certainly interesting. I mean,
Would it be then?
hallucination, you hallucinate, random things. People who seem to be dying, it
wouldn't
only
it
seems to be.
I'm walking all over you, and that is my fault, Gas. Go ahead, finish your sentence.
Okay, I was going to say hallucinations are random things. People can see anything from animals, goblins, ghouls, whatever. But these deathbed visions, they only seem to incur people, pets that have passed on.
Right, hang on. Deathbed visions only occur to people who were on their deathbed?
I think he's saying that what he's saying is you can see anything in a hallucination, but people on their deathbeds are only seeing people who have passed on. They're only seeing, loved ones who have gone before them. So they're seeing visions of things that are awaiting them in the life hereafter. They're not just seeing, unicorns and goblins and things like that.
So the commonalities, the white light, maybe a deity figure, the people they've loved, perhaps loved and lost in their lives, these commonalities bind them all together in experience.
Is that right,
I was asking you, Austin. Like, I want to make sure that I'm tracking along with what you're explaining. Yeah, just when you talk to me, use your hands. Yeah. Use small words when you communicate to me, Austin. I will figure it out eventually.
I believe so, right, Gaz?
Yes,
that's what you were saying. But that's what you were saying,
yes,
right?
Well, yes, it was.
Yeah. So my explanation would be exactly what I said to you earlier, which is the human brain has a great capacity for story retention and storytelling. And when you're in an experience that you've been told stories about your entire life, like a death cycle, and you've been told your entire life that you are going to be visited by people who have passed on before you, it makes sense that when you have a hypoxic brain that's starting to show you images and things that are you're starting to hallucinate or have very vivid visions in your mind of what might be happening next. It's going to unfold in the way that it's been told to you. It's going to unfold, the story that you've been told about what this experience is going to be the kind of story that unfolds in your mind about it. I think we've offered you some very plausible real world explanations that can exist outside of a supernatural explanation. I think the ultimate answer to this question of like, why do people see the things that they see right before they die is something that no one can actually definitively answer, because no one can actually definitively answer the question, why does anything pop into anyone's head at any moment? Why did I dream last night that I was driving and I wound up at my high school girlfriend's house, but she was a 40-year-old Filipino woman that I'd never seen before, but I knew in my brain that it was the same woman. I don't know. I can't tell you why, but that's what happened. And I don't, I just, the question of like, why do these things happen? Why is there a commonality of experience? No one can actually definitively answer that. I think we've posited plausible explanations to you. I would now turn the question back to you and say, do you have anything that could work as substantive evidence that this is, a functioning framework by which we can understand the existence of God, the existence of an afterlife? Do you have anything for that?
Well, basically, when you're saying, oh, it's down to like brain hypoxia and things like that, that really wouldn't make sense, because if the brain is dying and not working tidy, why would your brain be physically seeing your dead relatives, and these relatives are actually telling these people on a specific day and time that they're going to come back for them and they're going to pass, and that to physically happen?
I told you guys,
to me, is not hypoxia.
Well, I told you guys, I don't know why anyone's brain would see a particular thing. I don't actually have the answer to that question. I've given you some plausible possibilities as to why, but maybe Seth has an answer.
No. I think what the mind is drawing from experiences, and then we're still in the arena of the anecdote, where they told me this date or they told me this thing. To my knowledge, have been no studies. There's no traceable record that these experiences have a predictive quality. And we also understand the subjective nature of human thinking. We understand that memories are imperfect. We often remember things far differently than they actually happened. It's an interesting conversation, but for us, there's nothing here that constitutes anything remotely evidence for posthumous existence, heaven, reincarnation, any of those types of things. And if that evidence becomes available, we would want to know that. Okay, Gas?
Okay. Have you ever heard of Katharina? I think it's Hamer.
I'm not understanding you, my friend. Back away from the mic real fast. Say it again. Have I heard of what?
Have you ever heard of a person called, I think it's Katharina Hamer?
No.
If you can Google her name when you got time. Basically, she was somebody that was born physically disabled, mentally. She never spoke. She never had a conversation in her life. Nothing. And a couple of hours before she died, she started randomly singing and speaking normal, as if a completely different person had appeared.
Okay. Well, my first question is, if this is ostensibly a created being and all of this is proof of some agency and an afterlife, why would the creator of this disabled person wait till the final hours of her life to allow her speech? That's a whole other conversation. I am going to move on, Gaz. Thank you so much for your call from Wales, and be safe over there, okay? I talked about this in the past. Forgive me if it's been too recent or it was on this show. I can't remember, Austin, but I suffer from sleep paralysis. And for those who don't know what it's, they're called night terrors. It doesn't happen very often, like 3 times a year. And it used to freak me out a lot more when I was a believer. Forgive me if we've got a lightning storm, so my camera and everything may be flashing. And so we've got major weather. We've had tornadoes and floods and the whole thing. And there's another round coming in as we speak. So the lights are flickering here. If I disappear, that's why. It's not necessarily the judgment of God, is what I'm saying. So what happens in sleep paralysis is when we dream in stage 4 sleep, obviously our brain paralyzes us physically, so that whenever we dream we're running the marathon, we're in the Olympics or we're doing whatever, we're flying, we're not laying in bed flapping our arms and running our legs and whatnot. It paralyzes the body. We may twitch a finger, but the brain has prepared the body for REM sleep. With night terrors or sleep paralysis, you are actually dreaming, but your body is like almost near conscious. So you can sometimes actually see in the room. You are totally immobile. You cannot move a muscle hardly, and you panic. And so your heart starts to beat out of your chest, and you can't move. Some people report a dark figure in the room somewhere looming, and I've had that happen. And for me, Natalie has to reach over and wake me up because she can hear me over there like panicking in my sleep. And there are some people who say, well, there's a commonality of experience here. You wake up, you feel like there's something sitting on your chest, suffocating you. There is a being, a human type shape looming over your bed. Everybody many people report a similar experience. This must be proof of something. And I find that a fascinating, a guess or claim. But for me, it's just proof we are human beings. It's proof we don't have proof. And so when he was talking about the commonality of reported experiences, I was thinking about my own experience. And now, there have been whole documentaries produced about people who report the being who was looming over their bed. Well, I've seen that thing, but I don't know that it's a demon or something like that. Austin, I'm just babbling.
No, I've seen that documentary, and I agree. It's like anytime there's it's exactly what you're going to go do with this ghost hunting thing that you do. That people will report these similar stories about ghosts, about the temperature changes just so in a room when an entity becomes angered by your presence or something like that. And the fact that there is a commonality of experiences reported of things that people are alleging to see or witness at the moment of death or just before the moment of death, like I said, the question of what's the explanation for that? Again, we on this show are not the ones making the truth claim about what the explanation of that is. We don't come on this show and go, I know exactly why that happens, and here's my explanation. And then, we're not the ones who are having to defend the claim. When you're a theist calling in with that question, your claim is this commonality of experience is proof of an afterlife. It's proof of a higher power. It's proof of the existence of a God. And what your charge is when you call in on the show is to demonstrate evidence of that claim that you're making. We're not making that claim. I'm perfectly fine saying, I don't know why some people see the things they see when they're in active sleep paralysis or when they're in an active death cycle. I can posit to you explanations that to me seem more rational and reasonable and in line with objective observable reality than God or magic. But my ultimate answer is I don't know, and I'm comfortable with that answer. You're the one who's claiming to know what the explanation is. So you need to be calling in with something that is, you just need to be calling in with stronger evidence, basically.
Hey there, Eric. Noting that anyone watching that clip makes atrociously poor life decisions, where should they send their protection money to prevent further damage?
All protection money should be sent to patreon.com/calltheline, or else we will break your kneecaps.
Okay, we can't say that. I think we can't say that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hit like and subscribe.